We acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional lands of the Gunai-Kurnai Nation and that sovereignty was never ceded. We pay respects to elders past, present and emerging.
We acknowledge that we benefit from the colonial structures and policies that remain in place today. We stand in solidarity with First Nations people and recognise the ongoing process of dismantling those structures.
During the First World War, strikes caused fuel shortages so severe that the Victorian Government reopened the old brown coal mine near Morwell in the Latrobe Valley.
And the state government has outlined a long-term plan to ensure the Latrobe Valley remains viable as its economy moves away from coal-fired energy.
It's been the lifeblood of the Latrobe Valley for decades, but continual change in the power industry and the introduction of the carbon tax means it's time for a plan B.
It's a month tomorrow since fire entered the Hazelwood coal mine in Victoria's east.
Fire has been burning for weeks now, blanketing the township in a toxic smoke. The housing estates are literally just 50 metres away, so when the wind blows in the other direction, they take all of that in.
The guillotine has finally come down on Australia's dirtiest power station, Hazelwood. It's caused jitters about electricity prices and raised questions about Australia's readiness for a low-carbon future.
We're not going to achieve net zero in the cafes, dinner parties and wine bars of our inner cities.
The Latrobe Valley's coal mines could be filled with water and made into a tourist attraction to rival Italy's Lake Como.
So, shall we crack on?
Yes, let's crap on.
We are two people with a podcast.
We are, and we have microphones in front of us, and we have access to the World Wide Web, so let's roll with that.
Let's scroll on. This season, we're in our history era. We're going to be taking you on a 6-episode journey from prehistory right through to some very exciting interviews with smart people working on energy, space, future stuff.
As a reminder, this podcast is on Gunai-Kurnai land in Gippsland in the Latrobe Valley. And up until very recently, the Latrobe Valley produced 85% of Victoria's electricity via brown coal. And we are in the midst of a huge energy transition at the moment. We are moving from coal to renewable resources. And we are endlessly fascinated by the people that are part of this transition, the history that's led to here, the people and the places that are part of this energy transition.
It does make me feel crazy sometimes that we're this interested. Like, I was literally just perusing a book from the 1920s about, it's called like Song of the Lyrebird, and I had sweaty palms when I found it because it's like ancient 1920s recountings of like people who worked in the valley, and I'm like, ooh, my special interest.
That is amazing. And I was at a party the other day and I've got nothing to talk about.
You bailing people up to talk about coal.
No, coal and renewables and offshore wind, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, is this boring? And they're like, no,
I'm the wind guy.
If you're okay, we're okay, go on.
Go off, kid.
But I feel like I know too much.
We do.
I know too much.
We've seen the other side. In today's episode, we want to take you all the way back to our prehistoric history, touch on our First Nations history, and also tell you about something very special to Gippsland, the GGE, the Gippsland giant earthworm. I'm very excited about that if you can't tell. So Steph, I'm curious, we've obviously been on a bit of a research quest or a journey. I'm curious what that experience has been like for you.
So it was daunting, I've got to be honest. So when I was first like, we're doing this episode based on the historical eras, it was like a little bit exciting. And then I was like, oh no, like we've got to talk to a bunch of academics and storytellers and experts who know way more about this than we do. Oh my God, I've not studied this discipline. I better do all the reading. So that was kind of how it was for me.
I think getting the self-doubt on of just rereading academic texts as well. So obviously throughout this episode, if you catch us in a lie or catch us in anything we've interpreted wrong, feel free to scream at us in the comments. Please, under this episode. Go ahead.
None of us, we haven't studied this.
Yeah, we'll link our sources up below, but obviously we could have been wrong about any of these things. But our experts, those are who you should listen to. We are just your humble shepherds.
Purveyors of experts.
Your purveyors of coal information. One thing we both were struggling to wrap our heads around were, because we need to spend most of this season talking about like sort of the energy transition, and I really struggled to kind of comprehend how fucking recent in terms of the world's history or the like Earth's history that electricity came about. So I put together a timeline. Would you like me to run you through a timeline that will help us to comprehend just how late in the game electric has come about?
Oh, Josie, you know how much I hate numbers. Go for it.
And these numbers are like incomprehensible. All right, so Earth He's bloody formed 4,540 million years ago. Now, yes, correct, that is the same thing as billions, but for whatever reason, the graph that I'm pulling this from spoke in MYA, which is million years ago, as a format. 4,000 million years ago is when we get the first forms of life. So there's just like 500 million years with just, I don't know, rocks and shit. It's a long time. 2,500 million years ago. Yeah. Sorry. I don't know if, no, microbes are alive. So I think.
Oh, true.
Could be wrong about that, but didn't specify in the graph.
Hasn't been invented yet. Got it.
So then 2,500 million years ago, we get the Proterozoic period, and that has fancy stuff. That's what you're asking about. That's when we get the multicellular organisms. Love a multicellular organism. 538 million years ago, the Pranozoic period starts, and we get complex life. Vertebrates, that's us.
Ooh.
Yep. Then 65 million years ago, we get the first primates. That'll be your classic monkey, apes, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I've seen Planet of the Apes.
Yeah. It's just like that. They ride horses too, but I think horses come later. Then about 40 million years ago, the forest that would later contribute to our tasty coal mines, and that's 430 billion tons of brown coal, that's when they grew. So I think maybe what blew my mind a little bit about that is like how long our like destiny of coal mining has been a thing. Like obviously loads of other stuff had to come, you know, we had to create a society that was so energy intensive that we needed it, but like that shit was seeded that long ago.
I was really fixated on this idea that we're burning this history.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's literally made from lots of cool stuff.
35 million years ago, the continent that would become known as Australia broke away from Antarctica, and that explains why I'm so cold all the time. So that was 35 million years ago that the trees are growing, but then for like millions and millions of years, just basically monkey stuff's going on, right? Homo habilis evolved about 2.8 million years ago. So evolved, right? So evolved. Just to be specific, if you don't like evolution, this probably is not the podcast for you.
We're not the people for you either.
No.
Yeah.
Heaps of evolutions keep going on, and we finally get Homo erectus at 2 million years ago. So Homo erectus been walking around upright for a long time.
Short 2 million years.
That Viagra really worked. Yeah. So that's 2 million years ago. They didn't find Homo sapiens until around 233,000 years ago, right? So again, this is like the time scale and all of this is mad. So we've got fossil records that we've found from around 233,000 years, but I guess it's possible that there's older ones, but they just haven't been found. So just to be politically correct, instead of calling them like Homo sapiens, I guess, we're supposed to call them AMHs now, which is anatomically modern humans. So that's Homo sapiens with consistent anatomy and phenotypes with us today versus the Homo sapiens that are extinct called archaic human species. So I'm really sorry if that's your family. It's not to be offensive, but you know, obviously the main ones of us that have survived are the ones with anatomics and phenotypes, which we all know what those are, that are like us.
Look at you go, Josie. I've already learned something this morning and it's not even 7.
That's right. We're really, really crushing it today. After that 45 billion years, right, we don't get even like people until 233,000 years ago. So it's like billions and billions of years with just fucking nobody that I even know.
Who invited us here to wreck the place?
Truly. So we get people. So this is okay, and this really, really, I thought for me brought into perspective. Like I'd heard that that First Nations people had been around for 65,000 years. Like sort of like a common thing you hear in Australia. But I think hearing that we only even had fucking modern people at 233,000 years ago, finding out that First Nations people actually arrived in Australia at 65,000 years ago really kind of brings into stark reality just how long they have been here. In Gippsland, at the Cloggs Cave site, which we're going to talk more about later, there is evidence of occupation of the area as between 12 and maybe even up to 17,000 years ago, depending on the source. So again, people have been inhabiting this Gippsland area for a really, really, really long time, and that's just what we've discovered and found. Tasmania's land bridge was connected until about 12,000 years ago. Then a discovery. See, I thought electricity was invented, but Wikipedia very much corrected me to say it was discovered. So that was happening between the land bridge disappearing and then the Industrial Revolution. We're skipping a couple of years here. That's in 1760. Then thousands and thousands and thousands of years later, after First Nations people were here, fucking James Cook shows up. That's when we get like colonialism. Whilst we've got people rediscovering or falsely claiming to discover Australia, or what would become Australia, electric capacitors are also being developed in 1745.
Wow.
Those are for storing electricity, for those of you playing at home. You get your first fleet in 1788. Batteries are invented in 1800 by Alessandro Volta. What a great last name.
Alessandro.
I'm changing my last name. This kind of blew my mind. We don't get fucking lamps until 1808. Lamps.
Like any kind of
Just
lamp?
any kind of lamp.
Not an oil lamp?
Well, maybe. I'm talking about electric lamps.
Okay, all right. Like, so electric lamps that plug into the wall.
Electric, yeah. And
Yeah,
it was
continuing
rare. It was
electricity
rare.
means.
Yes. And I'm just like casting your mind back, like, we've had humans for 233,000 years and we didn't have lamps till like 200 years ago.
I feel like that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy thing where they're talking about how humans invented the wheel but couldn't decide what color to make it.
Yes. I think this timeline really says
exemplifies that.
Yes. What it also makes me think about is how we're so preoccupied with our contemporary history, but God knows what was, well, not God, but like who knows what was happening in that big gaps. Like they would have had like wars and love and like families and like it's just not written down.
Yeah.
So
and that
shout out to all of the Homo erectus.
What was I going to say?
Shout out
to the people who keep history through oral tradition.
Yes.
Like the Aboriginals.
Absolutely.
In Australia.
So we get lamps in 1808. Coal is discovered in the 1860s in Victoria. So again, quite late in the game.
Globally?
No, coal just in Victoria.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Sorry, we're on a big timeline.
No, I'm trying to bring us a focus to Gippsland. So coal's discovered in 1860s in Victoria. Thomas Edison, you might have heard of him. He invents incandescent light bulbs in the late 1800s. This also shocked me. So you know how driving around, everything's lit? We have public street lighting. We didn't get public street lighting in Victoria until 1863.
What?
Yep.
What?
It was like newfangled technology, and I bet people were like, "Oh, so bright." Oh God, now I really can't do my murders
that is
anymore.
like I can actually put that in my timeline to Jack the Ripper.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
yes. So a lot of serial killers unhappy with the invention of street lights, really shut down a good time. Then Australia federated in 1901. Good or bad, that's what happened. We didn't actually get widespread electrification of homes until the 1920s. And then that basically brings us to today. And I'm sorry, but that is how you cover 4.5 billion years.
With a light scraping of events.
Did I miss nuance?
Yes.
Did I forget most things? Are some of those facts incorrect? Absolutely. I feel like just from a very top-down big history perspective, it kind of just puts into like frame how many things had to come together to get us to a place where I'm like, oh God, my electricity bill is so expensive. So I want to acknowledge that in speeding through this timeline, all of the nuance and stories are really lost. But I do think it gives us a great overview of how our land's ecology was formed and our energy destiny has been on this path since those forests grew 40 million years ago.
So I guess I just want to touch on too that there's a lot of First Nations history around the world, and particularly Aboriginal history in Australia, that we'll touch on throughout the season. And as we were saying before, like there's evidence of 65,000 years of continuous Aboriginal culture. So it's largely considered the world's oldest continuing culture, but it wasn't monolithic. There's different practices, different language groups, different beliefs. So-called Australia had a lot of different cultures, and there's a whole timeline dedicated to significant finds on this continent from Aboriginal history. So just Gunai-Kurnai land, for example, has 5 clans of the Gunai-Kurnai, which have distinct language groups and practices just here. So Treaty for Victoria is happening in 2025. That's a huge thing for First Nations people across Victoria and First Nations justice. So we'll share some links in the show notes about how you can get involved with Treaty in 2025.
So Steph, I very much grew up as a dinosaur kid. I watched Jurassic Park maybe 100,000 times. I collected dinosaur info packs and I wanted to be a paleontologist. Did you grow up as a dinosaur kid?
I did. I used to get those magazines that you ordered that would come every month that had like dinosaur things in a binder. Yeah, in a binder. And I got like, I was probably more of an animal kid than anything else. Like I loved animals, but I loved dinosaurs too. What was really cool is we had this stamp book that we got from somewhere that had info about all the dinosaurs and dinosaur stamps.
It's better in stamp form.
It's great in stamp form. And me and my brother used to use that heaps. And now that I have nibblings, that's my brother's kids, they are using this stamp kit. So I'm getting to see the same stamp kit because my parents like hide everything. So our dinosaur traditions have been passed down the line.
I'm so glad. There is something, because universally children do seem to become fascinated by dinosaurs. And I think for me, it was like not only the imagination of like the fact that we live on the same soil that dinosaurs roamed. I think there was just something so it feels like fucking magic, but it's real.
Exactly. I think that's what it is. And they're going to see the bones and how big they are. But it's your child brain is quite, adept at imagination.
Yes.
But it's so huge. I remember like learning, I think I might have been on the way to adulthood, but I remember learning that dinosaurs might not have had scales like in Jurassic Park, and they had feathers, and that being mind-blowing because you think of all the colours of bird feathers.
Yes.
And like, what's to stop a dinosaur having like, I don't know, toucan
I love
feathers?
that. I have that adult dinosaur coloring thing, and I'm like, fabulous dinosaurs with all sorts of colours.
I just want to say we've both got a lot of dinosaur ornaments around our house / toys.
So we're saying like dinosaur kids, but I've fully grown into a dinosaur adult. Like, absolutely. I thought I would just take that opportunity to shout out the fact that Gippsland is actually really rich in dinosaur bonage and history. So if you are listening to this podcast from anywhere else,
actually 15,000 dinosaur bones along the coast at Bunurong, which is the little coastal area between Inverloch and Cape Patterson, if any of you have ever summered or spent time at the beaches in Gippsland.
And there's really, really, like, you can go and do it like a dinosaur walk. I'm not sponsored, but I'll put the links in the notes if anyone's curious to go and see the attractions. We also, in the 70s, in Australia, in Gippsland, they discovered what were at the time the oldest footprints on record, which were 355 million years old.
I remember reading that. That's massive.
Yeah. So, if you are a dinosaur kid / adult, just know that Gippsland, because of our rich history of ecology and trees and shit, we got a lot of good bones. So if that's your jam, highly recommend checking out some of Gippsland's dino culture. Speaking of ancient things in Gippsland, we've got some great archaeological research going on in caves.
We sure do, JC, we sure do. So what's funny is like when we first started looking into like what's interesting about the long history of Gippsland, we both stumbled upon Cloggs Cave.
How would you describe the situation? Like, what is Cloggs Cave? Why were we both so excited?
Cloggs Cave is a site that's been excavated by the Gunai Land and Waters Aboriginal Corporation, or GLAWAC, and Monash University.
Now, there is a lot of rich history in Cloggs Cave, obviously, because it's an archaeological site, but also there was some things around it being considered sacred land through oral storytelling traditions. Then there'd also been excavation done without the consent of Gunai people. And so a lot of interesting things had been found in the cave up until that point. This research that's been done recently, I believe last year, and in the years leading up to that, was such a landmark thing because it was actually done in partnership and with permission. So they went deeper in the cave than they ever have before. But I just wanted to touch on the fact that, there is a rich history of other finds as well.
Knowing that they have evidence of, I think, up to 500 generations, which is about 12,000 years, I think there's a real problem with human brains in those numbers because you hear it and like it simultaneously sounds heaps, but it's hard to fathom what that means. But I don't even know people who are 3 or 4 generations before me. Like, if you're really lucky, you might have your great grandma. Imagine having oral traditions that go back 500.
Yeah,
that's
I know.
So hard to wrap my head around.
It is. It's really, really huge. So when we found out about this research, obviously we wanted to talk to the researchers that were involved in the project. So there is Gunai elder Uncle Russell Mullet, who's also the manager of the Registered Aboriginal Party, and Professor Bruno David from Monash Indigenous Studies Centre at Monash Uni, who have been spearheading this. Of course, there's it's always a team working on these projects. But we really, really wanted to chat to them, so we reached out to request an interview about what they found at Cloggs Cave so they could break it down for you because we ain't no paleoarchaeologists. No. But obviously spearheading groundbreaking archaeological studies, there isn't a lot of time spare to chat to casters like us. So we welcome them on the show anytime, but we couldn't catch them for this episode, so we're just telling you about it. And also we're going to link up some of the excellent source material about Cloggs Cave in our show notes as well.
Because I knew you'd be taking on the reading about this, I sort of tapped out at the point where I was just like, wow, 12,000 years, and then I stopped reading. So I am so fascinated. You simply must tell me what is actually in the cave. What is their studies found?
Yeah, so they found evidence of rituals, as you said, dating back 12,000 years, which is the end of the Ice Age, which is just
sounds
massive.
Cold.
And so there was 3 distinct excavation sites, the 2 of them that have been most recently excavated in this partnership, and they found fireplaces there.
Ooh.
And in the fireplaces they found sticks that were wood-shaped like tools. And then they did some chemical testing on the sticks and they found animal or human fat. And that's how they've dated these objects back to 12,000 years.
So I'm guessing we don't know, but is the fat from cooking?
Well, it's animal or human. That was like what the research said.
Oh.
So it's some kind of fat, but no, it's been used to shape the tool.
Oh,
and
like
things
rubbing
like that.
oil or something.
Yeah, from what I can understand. So yeah, it was just to be super duper clear, the two small fireplaces that they excavated, they both had shaped sticks embedded inside of them, and the chemical analysis showed that they had fat smeared on them, either human or animal, dating back to the end of the last ice age. So that's the time period how they got it. And these findings have validated the oral traditions of Gunai people and aligns with the knowledge that Cloggs Cave is a sacred place.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's and this isn't just big in Australia. This is like a global landmark discovery. I don't want to say I'm an archaeologist or anything, but I have a bit of a cave story if you want to hear it.
Yes.
Do you know my cave story?
Do you know caves, sinkholes, and like murders are like up there with my favorite things? So
I had no
let's
idea.
go.
So we do have some caves like around Gippsland. I'm not going to identify which cave I'm talking about, just in case. But I was at a certain cave where some excavating for a certain thing happened, digging for something. And I was very little. I want to say I was maybe 5. And I was on this tour. There was somebody talking. It was really boring. We had lights and stuff like that. And I was running my hand down a handrail, like in the cave. There was like a ledge or whatever. And I just was running my hand down there the whole time. And my hand hit a coin.
A coin?
Yeah, a coin. So I grabbed the coin and I put it in my pocket. And on the way home, I got it out and showed my parents. And it's a coin from the 1920s. It's a silver coin. And I just found it in a handrail in a cave that takes tours all the time.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I still have that.
Special. Well, 1920s is when we first got proper electricity hanging about.
Yeah,
so bring the coin in.
Yeah, but it's just, it's still to this day, I'm like, so many people have mined there.
Yeah.
And also they've been doing tourism there and no one found it except me. It was just like my little hand in this ledge.
Just the little remnants of human life.
So that's my archaeological
That's your
discovery.
cave.
Like, mere 100 years old. My God.
Yeah. I think I've done a tour of all of the Buchan caves, which is around the same area that Cloggs Cave is, and they are also like, not to be, I feel like I work for Tourism Gippsland, but like those are also very beautiful.
They are really cool.
Yeah, get a chance to like explore them. We kind of set ourselves the challenge of like episode 1 is supposed to get us to around the golden age of coal. So the other thing we were sort of looking at this episode was like, how do we explain why specifically Gippsland became a coal mining region? And then of course we were like, well, it's those goddamn forests. Like I remember as a kid, one of the narratives that you're told growing up in Latrobe Valley is just like a super simplified version of the way that the trees became coal and how they got, what's the word? Not crusted, like
burnt. Charcoal.
Yeah, charcoal. They become like, and that sort of thing. So I feel like I've kind of had that narrative about how coal is made presented to me my whole life. So we were really looking for someone who would be able to speak to us about the trees and the ecology and the specifically like how the forests become coal.
So we were talking to our super smart academic friend Jessica Reeves. Hi there, Jess. Thanks for listening. And we were trying to look at some interesting guests we could have on. And Jess was like, what about a paleobotanist? And I was like, what the heck is a paleobotanist? Well, that is how we got connected with Ian Sluiter. Now, Ian corrected me. Ian is not a paleobotanist, but he has studied both botany and fossils. So yeah, he did his honours in botany and then a scholarship opportunity led him to studying coal in the 80s and 90s in the Latrobe Valley. So he sent me through a paper that he co-authored in 1994 called Fire and Late Oligocene to Mid-Miocene Peat Megaswamps of Southeastern Australia and the Floristic and Paleoclimatic Interpretation. I read it with great difficulty and then thankfully Ian was free to chat with me on the phone to like answer some of my questions. Yeah, it's just like when you're reading a discipline that you haven't studied, the words make sense but not.
They're words, like they are English, but in fact, are you in understanding?
No, I'm not in understanding. Yeah. I'm not in understanding. And I tried so hard. I read not only that paper, I read other papers around the same thing.
Yeah. My understanding is like all of his work is around looking at the way that the actual plants from the olden days plant, that's the technical term, become coal.
Yeah, so Ian looked specifically, and his team studied coal deposits from the late Oligocene to the mid-Miocene period, which is 25 to 13 million years ago. So they came from massive ancient swamps, unlike anything we can see on this earth today. It's really, really hard to conceive what these swamps looked like. There were dozens of kilometres of swamp forest, and this extended dome structures that went like 10 meters up in the ground. I asked Ian to describe it to me, and he was like, you kind of can't. It's like really extremely hard to describe because we just don't have that amount of natural places left. He said that the plant life that existed within these peat mega swamps and things was, similar to what was in Australia and New Zealand. The most similar place where we could find structures that existed before the coal is in New Caledonia. So I looked that up, and that's where a lot of our peat comes from. That's peat and sphagnum moss that you buy in the like Bunnings
Yes,
or whatever.
yes.
We used to have that here. So not only did we have the swamps, we had the forest, and it was like tens of meters in the air. So they found evidence of fires in the swamps as well, and figured out what the climate and plant life looked like back there because of all of this research. So I asked, like, in in botany, when you're looking at macro and micro fossils, like, because in my mind, a macro fossil is a dinosaur bone, like a giant dinosaur bone, and a micro fossil is a leaf.
Yeah.
But Ian kind of corrected me in that a macro fossil could be like a leaf or part of a formed leaf, and a micro fossil is a component that you have to look at under a microscope.
Oh.
So
they use it very differently to economics.
Well, yes, differently to
Yeah.
economics and to most applications. So that was really interesting to me, just as a tidbit. Like, I knew things would be microscopic, obviously, but I just, we're talking like chunks of things sort of thing.
Well, that's sort of to your point about how different disciplines really utilize language so differently. And so if you've, the odds of you being trained in that specific area to understand it is so challenging.
And like, please don't ask me to break this down anymore, because I'm not going to be able to.
I don't even know how to formulate a question based on it because I don't understand.
So they used pollen grains to date the coal sediment, like the lithotypes of coal, which is the different shades and colours of coal.
Wait, did you say a dome? Maybe you don't know the answer, but like, does he mean a dome?
Yeah, so a canopy of trees, like, a domed canopy of trees, I imagine. Please, Ian, come. I know Ian's son's going to listen to the podcast. Yep. Someone tell us if we're wrong, because we have a fact check corner that we can add to. And like, I don't want to misinform the fine people of
about the
Coal Face
domes.
podcast. Another thing that Ian left me with that was like kind of horrifying is like, the climate here was tropical. It was like, it was a really tropical climate, and a lot warmer and wetter than it is today, and that it changed so very quickly. And he spoke about too how a fire could come through and wipe out this whole area just from a lightning strike. And he said it was really important to understand what had happened in the past, so we can look at how the climate changes in the future. So,
that stresses me out.
Yeah.
Ian, are we fine, or do we need to move?
Well,
where do we move, Ian? Tell me where to live.
I
find that just so fascinating. I think, again, this episode has been a lot about stuff that's very hard to, you can hear the words, but to actually conceptualize the scale of the time, the scale of the forests, and the fact that we are living in this sort of like predetermined ecological history, I think is really, really kind of quite hard to wrap your head around. But I feel like that kind of summarizes for us, that's how ancient Australian ecosystems worked. That's what the climates were like in the past. The role of fire in shaping plant communities over millions of years, and how massive peat deposits formed, which is important for understanding coal formation and carbon storage.
Yeah, exactly. So the Gippsland Basin, as it's called, is particularly special because it's preserved a record of the ancient swamp life here, and it shows us what Australia was like millions of years ago. So
swampy.
Yeah, very swampy.
Hearing about all of this kind of makes me think about the sort of stories that you're told as a child. So I mentioned, like, I was told a lot about the, like, sort of a very simplified version of the way that coal was made. Like, I think my parents tried to just, like, simplify it down. But did you get told sort of stories and myths about, like, our history?
Well, yeah, and, like, to bring this back to Gunai things again, like, when I was growing up, people used to say that Moe, where I lived, was Aboriginal for swamp, which obviously, clearly I know now it isn't, because there isn't a monolithic Aboriginal language. There is distinct language groups. But I did research this to check. I hadn't thought about this for a long time, so I tried to Google, like, what is Gunai for swamp? And so I stumbled upon Kittle, the Gunai language facts for kids, and it's true. Moe, they don't know what dialect of Gunai clans that Moe came from, but it does mean swamp, but it was spelt Moe, like Mouay.
Oh.
Which I think is heaps fancier. It's like it got its pinky up when it talks.
Well, that kind of fits in with what I was always told, that it was short for Moe and Shandon, as if it had been like the
Shandon,
like the Chardonnay. Yeah. In the same way that we do Tajay.
Yeah.
But I feel like that might have just been my family trying to, like, class up the valley.
Well, yeah, we went to
Moe
Tarjay as well.
In Tarjay, yes.
Yeah, class up the valley.
So we've covered bogs and swamps. We've covered
and peat.
45 billion years. You know who's better than 45 billion years? Our good friend Electra.
Yes, Electra is better than 45 billion years of history. Well, she makes a lot more sense to me.
Certainly. I understand Electra a lot more than 45 billion years.
Yeah. But yeah, so I actually also spoke to Electra Green as part of this, who's one of my favourite people. Electra volunteers at Environment Victoria with us. She's a local organiser. So I think we must have known Electra for like 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, I think so.
I was thinking. And yeah, I had a chat with her. Electra is a Kurnai Gunai Monero woman who lives in Sale, who grew up in Moe and Tyres. She's an incredible spoken word poet, a volunteer local organiser with Environment Victoria, and works for Bug Blitz. So we wanted to talk to Electra about bugs and environment. For those who don't know, Bug Blitz is a educational platform that visits schools and goes out to events to teach kids and adults all about bugs and the environment. And Josie, have you ever touched a bug?
Oh, yes, I have. And thankfully, it was through the good people at Bug Blitz. So we ran an event a couple years back and we managed to get Bug Blitz to agree to come along, and watching the children's faces. Like, I'm not really a kid person, but I think watching children touching bugs is one of my favorite. That sounds creepy and weird, but I'm basically saying that, like, they have a touring caravan that comes around and sort of does science education for Gippsland people, but they also have like a First Nations component, which is where Electra comes in.
Yes.
So not only are they teaching you about biology and like cool bug stuff, they're also teaching you about like First Nations storytelling stuff.
Yeah, because Electra is very well versed in bugs, environment, and personal experience. I asked Electra what it was like growing up here, what's so special about Gippsland and bugs.
I actually grew up in Tyres, and my dad worked at ULW. He worked there, worked his way up to be in the control room. I grew up going to the SEC Christmas parties that they had every year from a young age until I was about 12. I think the Christmas parties went until that age. When I was a young girl, I rode horses at the back of Tyres and used to swim in their rivers, but they are now dried up and curved landscapes now. I grew up in the bush, so with my horse and my dog, so I suppose that's what gave me the connection to bush, growing up in and around it. Understanding the bugs. I remember when I was a little girl and I'd just play with bugs when I was little. Had this little kingdom of bugs and that and ants and whatnot and however. But it made me give me an appreciation later on in life, all them different levels to our environment. It is really amazing if we don't look after bugs, how actually long human people will last for. They won't actually last for long. I think it's about a year or two if all the bugs were to disappear. And bugs apparently, so John tells me, they cover most of the landscape across the world. So there's more species times than the species that are just walking animals that are walking around. So there's so many bugs, and they're very, very important. And they too have made me appreciate the environment.
You know, I feel like we might have interviewed a horse person before on this podcast.
We have indeed. It was Rhonda. Rhonda Hasty's a horse person. So Electra is our second horse person.
I'll put that on the tally. 2 horse people.
2 horse people. So I also asked Electra what was so special and unique about Gippsland, and she really kind of nailed it for me. I feel like I don't travel a lot at the moment. I'm a very work-orientated person. I don't get out to everywhere. I don't get to the beach. I don't get to the mountains. I don't get to the bush all the time, but I live in the bush. But so I asked Electra what was special about this place, and this is what she said.
Well, we're very, very fortunate. We've got the lake system, we've got the beach, we've got the rivers, and we've got mountains, we've got plains. So there's a lot of different diversities here in Gippsland that we should all be really proud about. Just imagine if everyone in Gippsland was really, really proud and done their one little step to better the environment, how much better it would be off. I mean, I don't do a great deal. I should be, I recycle. I'm a smoker, so I put my butts where they're meant to be. I don't put them on the ground. I take 3-minute showers. So little things like that. I'm trying to be better in my life. But my daughter, she does little steps too, like she buys environment-friendly products, whether they're skin for makeup and things like that. So everyone does their own little bit too.
It goes a long way.
Yeah, to try and be cautious of the environment, the impact that we're having.
Oh, well, that's such a good description. I really like, because I think too, Gippsland is almost like a mini map in a video game. It's got like the beach, it's got the mountains. It's like if you were designing kind of a self-contained area, it would be like Gippsland.
It would, and I really liked what Electra said about if everyone just looked after a small piece of it and did a small bit, there wouldn't be so much work to do. And like, as somebody who cares about the environment and people, like it is really important to connect with the natural places that we have and to feel like we need to care for them because they care for us. We asked a lot about the past with Electra, but we also chatted about the future and what made Electra excited.
Well, our people are very, very in tune with their culture down here. I mean, I was up at Lake Tyers just the other day and the young folk in their 20s and 30s, and I'm in my 50s, they were really on track with their culture and knowing different things that I grew up with knowing. And I thought, I was so wow, and they were so in tune with the environment and wanting to know about bugs. So it was really, really, really exciting to see the next generation growing up being excited about different environment elements. It made me definitely excited more than hopeful. I was excited to know that these young folk are really on the mind, knowing what they know and having that interest. So, you know, we can get lost in a digital world so much, you know, and we lose base with our natural world, that it was a very exciting moment to be around 5 young folk that were excited about their environment and bugs.
So yeah, that's incredible to hear that there is, like, you know, obviously there's still ongoing cultural passing down of knowledge and traditions. And it's really nice to hear about young people that are connected to the environment and to bugs. And before we leave bugs forever, do you have a favourite bug?
Oh, worms. I don't want to be a creep or anything, but that's a perfect segue into what we're talking about next.
Oh my God. It's almost like it was planned.
Oh. So when I think of earth, I think of dirt. And when I think of dirt, I think of worms. So I was very, very excited to be able to have an excuse to look into one of our magical special element of Gippsland's special soil, our giant Gippsland earthworms. So Steph, I'm curious, like I know that you knew they existed, but have you actually seen any of the images of these worms?
So I have looked them up before and I have stumbled upon that site and I was so stoked of the dedication for somebody to make a website about the Gippsland earthworm. But I don't think I really, like, how big they are doesn't really compute a little bit at the same time.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. So I did a little bit more digging and I found that the website is actually written by the one and only Dr. Beverley Van Praag, who is an invertebrate ecologist who's been actually studying these incredible creatures for 30 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so she's like singularly focused on these worms, which I think is so utterly cool. Also found, and I'm sure you had a look at that website too, that there is a very special page on that website about the secret sex lives of these worms. Basically, the way that these worms have sex is that they all have both sex organs. So non-binary, confirmed.
Oh my God, non-binary worms.
Or I guess multi-sex.
Intersex worms?
Kind of, yeah. All of the worms have both sex organs, and while nobody's actually witnessed their copulation, although I'm sure people have tried, we think that they likely have sex by getting side to side in the reverse position, aligning their male openings so that they can exchange sperm. The sperm of the partner is stored in little chambers called spermathecae.
Wow.
Spermathecae. And then when they're ready to produce egg cocoons, which tell me about it, that's me all the time, their clitellum, often called a saddle, swells in size and secretes the egg case and fluid that sustain the growing worm.
Wow.
Very erotic.
It is very erotic. And also, I just want to say, like, it's amazing that there's still so much that we don't know.
And they're just
that
there.
we haven't even seen worms going.
Yes.
Like, what I was thinking is, like,
worms going.
worms going at it. Yeah, going at it and reproducing. Because, like, people are filling in gaps of things like aliens in, like, buildings.
We're lying about stuff. And there's, like, real
there's
things
really
we don't
cool
even know.
things we don't
I
know, like how worms have sex under the ground.
People, there's like, if you want a conspiracy out, if you've got all that time and energy
Put
to
it into
research,
the
there's
worms.
real stuff you could
Yeah, real
become
stuff.
an ecologist and dig into some worm
Yeah.
business. So after they've done their little secretion, the cocoon case slides slowly forward, picking up
Oh,
eggs.
that is too erotic.
It's so much. Like the webpage is excellent. I highly recommend looking at it.
Foreskin.
Yeah. So the cocoon case slides slowly forward, picking up the eggs and the stored sperm, and then it moves over the head of the earthworm and eventually hardens. Fertilization occurs inside the egg cocoon. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. I thought it was extremely necessary and on topic. Because I was so obsessed with this website, I decided to reach out to Dr. Beverley, who actually agreed to speak with me about the giant Gippsland earthworms.
Oh, that's
and
so cool.
I want to share this conversation because I feel like the way that these are connected is because I think that the fact that we've got these giant worms really speaks to how special our Earth is here, and the fact that we've got kind of like a unique thing going on. And I do wonder, like, if we had giant peat bogs, are they like a remnant of the one of those previous times? I don't know. That's a pure speculation.
Curious.
Pure speculation.
Yeah. No scientific fact here.
Absolutely not. I got to speak with Dr. Beverley a few weeks ago. She's an invertebrate ecologist who's been studying these creatures for 30 years.
Hi, I am Beverley Van Praag, and I have been working on these magnificent creatures for probably over 30 years. And even though I've been investing a lot of time, there's still so much we don't know. So that's one of the things I love about them. And I guess it's hard to go past not loving a giant creature, something that's one of the biggest creatures in the world. That in itself is wonderful, and that they are an underground animal that we don't see very much. So the times that I have seen them, I think they're actually beautiful creatures, and certainly worth protecting. And yeah, I just love them.
So we've just described the worms earlier, but I really wanted to find out from Beverley just how big they are, because I feel like you kind of hear from people various sizes. So this is what she had to say about just how big they are.
Well, the adult worms are kind of around about 1 metre, 120, but I have found worms up to 2 metres in length before, and probably about the thickness of your thumb. So they are really big, and they also have this ability to expand and contract. So if you hold a worm up by its head, which I don't suggest you do, but when people are wanting to make a really big earthworm, they do. And, you know, a worm that might be, say, 80 centimetres will double its length because it relaxes and stretches right out. And there used to be a bit of a trick that people did, and they'd hold several worms end to end and make it look like one large earthworm. So you did see photos in the past of worms that probably look like they were 3 metres, but really they're around that 1 metre, but definitely can get up to 2 metres. So they're the real big giants.
The GGEs, which is what we call giant Gippsland earthworms, were first discovered in the late 1800s. One early account documented in The Land of the Lyre, A Story of Early Settlement, a book from 1920, which I found a copy of, which I'll include in our resources. It's very cool. It was particularly gruesome. Speaking with Australian Geographic, Beverley said, after the land was cleared, the farmers would plough the land. While they did this, the fields would be red with blood from these worms. They would hang from the ploughs like spaghetti.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
Isn't it? Could you imagine just being like, I just want to plant my potatoes, but it's actually just
Agriculture's
full of...
ruined so much and done some really great things.
So hungry for potatoes.
Oh, the poor worms.
Isn't that I thought that was very visceral.
Yeah.
So I was really curious because if you think back to that timeline, like we didn't have streetlights in 1878. We didn't really have lamps, apparently. So I asked Beverley about the initial discovery of the worms and what else was going on in 1878.
Yeah.
Because they're soft-bodied and they don't have any hard structures within their body, there's nothing in the fossil record really for them. So all we know is that they were found up near Brandy Creek, so north of Warrigal, in about 1878 by railway workers who actually first thought it was a snake, which is quite understandable because really, who's going to expect to see an earthworm that's that big? And so they sent it down to Melbourne University where Professor McCoy there said, no, we've actually got an earthworm here, and he was the one who originally named it. Professor McCoy and Baldwin Spencer were the two people who worked at the museum in Melbourne Uni who were very much taxonomists and great all-round biologists, and so they named it. And then it was fairly quiet for quite a few years, and then there was a radio naturalist called Crosby Morrison, and he did quite a few, well, probably equivalent to podcasts back in the day, and talked about the worm and wrote a few articles. So there were sporadic articles, in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, etc., but not a lot else was going on with the worm until Museum Victoria, there was Brian Smith and Bill Peterson, they decided they wanted to know more about the worm. So they sent out questionnaires in 1980 to around about 3,000 people in the range of what they thought the earthworm occurred in, based on some of the literature. And from that survey, they were able to get information about their distribution and the sort of soil types and areas that they're found in. So that was quite iconic, because that then springboarded off a lot of other work, and something that we're doing now, actually. So really then, and I started my PhD in 1986-7, and we got funded by the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and really sort of been working on it ever since, and hopefully adding to the information about the earthworm over that time.
All right, so anytime you meet a biologist, scientist, sustainability person, activist or whatever, I always think that the person that they say that inspired them in childhood was fucking David Attenborough, right? I feel like that's a very common story. So Beverley got to actually meet and work with David Attenborough in 2005 when he was filming for the BBC. This is that story.
Yeah, it was really fantastic. Of course, you know, being a biologist, or wanting to be a biologist since I was quite young, he was absolutely one of my heroes. And then to find out that he was doing a series called Life in the Undergrowth for the BBC, and he wanted to do something on the giant Gippsland earthworm. We were actually at the time looking at a colony in Lock, just out of Lock, where they were putting a road through, and the road was going right through the earthworm colony. So we actually did a 3-month project and moved the colonies of earthworms out of the way of the road into some habitat further upslope. But because we were doing this work, we had exposed quite a few earthworms, and it was a great opportunity for Sir David Attenborough to come out and have a look at what we were doing and actually meet a giant Gippsland earthworm. So he did come out, and he stayed in Corumburra, the same hotel we were staying at. And I remember at the time, when he came out and we first met him, my colleague and I from the museum sort of ran into our little room there and jumped up and down on the bed saying, David Attenborough, my goodness, I can't believe we met him. So we spent quite a few days with him in Corumburra, and it was, you know, he sat in my car on the seat next to me in my little Honda. Back then, I was a little bit too starstruck, which I really regret now, but, you know, I probably didn't talk quite as much because I was so starstruck. But it was just, yeah, a really memorable experience. And he is just as wonderful as what you see on TV. You know, what you see on TV is how he is when you actually meet him, which is fantastic to see. But, you know, he did thought it was, the landscape was beautiful, you know, with the green rolling hills. And I do remember him, he was quite taken with the earthworms, the mystery of them being underground and are still, because they are extremely difficult to study, you know, there is still that mystery, and I think there always will be, about how they move, how they meet their mates in their burrows. They cast underground, which means they leave their waste products underground. So, you know, I know he was asking me some questions that I couldn't answer and still can't, but I think that's what he found really fascinating, almost those unanswered questions.
So, Steph, have you actually seen any of these worms, or do you know anyone who has?
Yeah, I haven't seen one in person, obviously, but I have watched the David Attenborough clip.
Ooh.
I was like, and you're right, everyone loves David Attenborough, and I'm not saying I'm not a fan, I am a fan.
Oh my God, do you hate?
No, I don't hate him, but people particularly seem to really, really adore him.
I'll include it in our Instagram feed, but there's a picture of Dr. Beverley holding up a worm as if it's like, you know, the catch of the day type fish, but it's like so big that it's strung between her two hands. It's absolutely insane.
I love that, and you made some pretty cool worm art too.
Oh yeah, I can include my worm. Dr. Beverley is actually working on a long-term study at the moment, revisiting the work she did in the 80s, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I was really curious to know, since this episode is sort of talking about what makes Gippsland special, what is it about Gippsland soil that makes our worms so big?
Well, we don't know all the details yet. It's sort of one of the things we're looking into a bit now. But the thing about these earthworms are, although they're found in South and West Gippsland, so it's about 40,000 hectares. So the top of their range is around Brandy Creek, Warrigal, and then we go right down past through Lock and Corumburra down to Almerta and places like that for the southern end of its range. But within that range, their habitat is really patchy. I kind of think of them as the Goldilocks of the earthworms when you're thinking about what they want from their habitat. So they don't like it too wet. They don't like it too dry. It's got to be just right, and a whole lot of factors come into play to determine what makes up suitable habitat. And one of them is they're found often really in quite structured clay soils. So that's really important for them. It's often that blue-grey red clay, and they also have a real critical requirement for soil moisture as well. So you've got to have that combination of the blue-grey clay soils and the right sort of moisture for them to survive. So you can have earthworms in very small patches of habitat that they survive in. So, I found them in areas of as small as a couple of metres squared, literally, and you'll have a few earthworms in that area and then nothing else around. And then there's a few other areas in the landscape, particularly on south-facing hills where you get sort of terracets and a bit of seepage. You can often get a bigger colony in those sort of areas, but very, very patchy. So, what it is about the soils in this area, we don't really know, but it's the only place they're found in the world. And then within this area we're talking about, in very small pockets of suitable habitat.
Steph, you live out of town on a farm. Have you ever heard them? I know you haven't seen them, but have you actually ever heard the sound?
I don't think so. So I think I hear foxes, the occasional koala, the traffic from the highway, just floats right up the hills, and the power stations are probably
what's
the
the
main
power
things I
station
hear.
sound?
It's just like a whirring. You can hear it in Newborough, I'm sure.
I heard that when they would release this.
Yeah,
and you're
it's
what is that?
I don't know. It's just, it sounds like, to me, I always thought it was just continuous cars on the highway. And then I realized that it wasn't actual cars because there was no cars coming that frequently, and it's power station noise, but just like a zooming. I don't know.
A zooming.
Zoom, zoom.
I didn't know, you're right. There's a background, just a constant background hum.
So, haven't you heard of power station syndrome? You go mad from the sound.
I'd much rather get wind syndrome, actually. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
On the Giant Gippsland Earthworm website, you can actually, there's an audio clip which I'll insert of the sound. Now, people describe it as a squelching, and apparently it's so loud that if you're walking on land above it, you can actually hear them in the earth. So
that's terrifying.
Isn't it? I'd like to hear that.
I want to hear it, but if I didn't know what it was, my God.
Yeah, I think you'd probably be like, am I going mad?
My science.
Yeah. So I will play that clip. And that is the sound of the worm squelching. So very, very squelchy. Visceral. The other thing that I thought would be interesting, as I know a lot of our listeners are either in Gippsland or the surrounds, is to find out how you can actually find out if your land is likely to have worms on it. So this is Beverley talking about where people can find GGEs on their property.
So if people want to know whether they've got earthworms on their property, there's a few ways we can do that. There are two types of habitat that the earthworms generally occupy, and that's along creek banks, those that aren't prone to flooding. So they're generally above that active floodplain. And then away from waterways, we might find them on south or west facing hills. And what you'll often see if they're in a slope of some sort, you'll see terracing, which often means you've got some soil slumping because it's quite wet. There's a soak or a seepage underneath. So they're often found in those and the creek banks. So what you do then is obviously creek banks are pretty extensive in the Gippsland area, but what you're looking for is indicators that they might support earthworm habitat. And that's usually the presence of chimneys, crayfish chimneys, which are like mounds of soil around an opening at the surface, and the presence of buttercups. So if you are walking along your creek and you see areas like that, they are really good areas to target and see if you have earthworms. And the way you do that is really just walk over them, stomp around a bit, and you actually will hear them moving under the soil. So they make this really loud gurgling sound. They're a bit of buggers, though. They don't always do it. But often, especially after rain or if it's moist or if you go over that area a few times a day, you're quite likely to hear the gurgles. So it's looking for areas where you've got increased moisture, and that's often reflected by the presence of crayfish, burrows, chimneys and burrows, and buttercup.
Now we know about the Gippsland worms, I really think they could rise in the ranks of our possible icons or ambassadors. Do you think there are any other animals that would make better ambassadors for Gippsland?
Well, I've got to say the monitor lizard.
Oh, that makes sense. Have you ever seen one?
I've never seen one in person, but it's also the symbol for the Gippsland Monitor, the new
That makes
news
a lot
publication.
of sense. Well, I think we need something that like I like lizards, But I do feel that a huge worm is a little more iconic.
The worms, the connection for children in particular, the connection for gardening.
Love eating a worm.
It feels like really clear, good combo. Also, the pelican from speaking to Ronald. Like, I didn't really know that pelicans were particularly unique to this region. And like, I know they exist in other places, but we have a distinct pelican population too. So
I'm just thinking like what works on a jersey for a sport, like Gippsland worms. The Gippsland worms.
I'd be a Gippsland worm. Yeah.
We are Gippsland worms.
GGEs. Great Gippsland worms.
I think now that we know that the worm is officially our ambassador, so the study from the 80s is being revisited and people can actually contribute to this now to help protect these amazing creatures. So Beverley's going to just talk a little bit about the study that's coming up and how you can get involved.
We've got 2 studies going at the moment, both funded by the federal government. So we're very lucky that they do consider the earthworm a pretty special species and are willing to put funding into it. So one of the ones we're doing now, which was one that I'm really excited about, was following up on that census that Museum Victoria did in 1980. So back then it was pen and paper. You know, a lot of paper questionnaires were sent out to all these residents. And out of the few thousand that they sent out, they got 600 back. And there was a lot of valuable information in those questionnaires, and which we've all digitised now, so other people will be able to access them at some time. And some of those questionnaires had information about worms that they'd had on their property from the early 1900s. So really fascinating stuff. So what we wanted to do was try to find out who owns that land now, some 40 odd years later, and whether the wormers are still existing on those properties, because we don't have a lot of information about population trends over time. And so I know that for the conservation side of things, we really would love to know, are they increasing in numbers? Are they decreasing? Are they still about the same? And then if we can really find those landowners that were given the questionnaire in 1980, of course, many of those will have been sold and passed on, but it's trying to target those as well and, go back and see if the earthworms are still in the areas that they were recorded 40 odd years ago. So we're hoping that we'll get some information more about distribution and about trends and a bit more about habitat. And then in the meantime, really encourage people to go and look for them on their properties, find out whether they have earthworms and, take some pride in knowing that they've got them.
Beverley said that it can be a barrier for some people because they're worried about what their involvement might mean for their land. So this is her sort of call to action for farmers specifically.
Oh, well, we'd really love all the farmers out there to take part in this project, to download the app and fill in the questionnaire. Hopefully in the process, they'll learn something about the earthworm and where they are on their own properties. And the outcome really is just information for us to understand where the earthworms are in the landscape in general and what the trends are in populations going up and down. So it's really that sort of outcome that we're after the information for. Right, it's both on it's called just GGE Census, and it's got a cartoon worm on it, pretty cute. That also has a link to the online questionnaire, and it takes only a few minutes to do.
Okay, so I think it's really, really interesting to look at the coal deposits and the soil that's created these worms and all of this mega peat swamp.
Everything's so mega.
Yeah, but it really shows what has created the earth that's around us and how everything is interconnected. And it's really incredible that we have this great plant life. I guess in the valley in particular, I don't get out amongst it a lot except for in my own place. But I feel really inspired to go just dig in the dirt or go connect with nature in some way. See a worm.
Get in the cave.
What these forests will become the fossils of.
What space fucking energy will we be digging up? And hopefully we won't be doing that anymore. Maybe we can do something else. Yes.
Covering 4.5 billion years.
Right up to the start of sort of the coal energy revolution in one episode. That's how much we were able to cover in episode 1. Imagine what we'll be able to cover in the rest. We'll be 45 billion years in the future.
Yes, we really skipped and jumped over a lot of that.
But I do think we have a bit of a grasp now and have set the stage for the energy revolution and the golden age of coal to hit the valley. I'm curious, Steph, was there any particular fact or tidbit that sort of has really stuck with you or shocked you when you were reading and writing about this episode?
So I think I was really, really fascinated by Cloggs Cave in particular.
Yeah.
And like, once again, like when I was a kid, I thought about dinosaurs and archaeology in that context, and also a lot into history and ancient civilizations kind of context too. But it was really particularly fascinating to learn about what we have here, because it's, you know, it's glossed over a lot for other types of finds, but just reading how much of a landmark discovery Cloggs Cave is, and about the 65,000 years of continuous Aboriginal culture, that was really, really special.
I think so too. I think something about putting it into a scale focused around energy, and then just seeing how far back the First Nations people have been, and specifically in Gippsland, I was like, oh my God. Like, I knew it obviously was a long time, but I think that really just helped me, or kind of, put it into perspective, literally.
Talking about the bugs and the worms as well. Like, I think that was just fascinating, and like to really hone in on the whole ecology system.
I think so. Yeah. I guess like it was kind of a journey in backfilling a lot of stuff that I'd kind of always heard in sort of more myth or oral form from people over the years, but I hadn't actually had an opportunity to deep dive into it myself. So I think obviously outside of worm sex, I think that the sort of scale of everything was really quite shocking.
Yeah, and that's been one of the hardest things to wrap my head around too. But yeah, we'll probably put a cool graph of someone else's work.
You better believe we're going to put up a graph and insert graph here.
Thank you very much to our wonderful guests and experts, Ian, Electra and Beverley. We really appreciate your work, and we will be listing your research and websites in the show notes.
Thanks again to Federation University Australia for supporting this podcast. The music for Coalface is by Anonymous 420 and Loyalty Freak Music. The series is written, edited and produced by Josie Hess and Stephanie Sabrinskas.
If you like what you heard, you can find us on Instagram at coalfacepod. Send us an email to coalfacepodcast@gmail.com, or follow us on Ko-Fi at Coalface Podcast.
Look out for the next episode of Coalface.